Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It is Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan. And on this Inside the Birds, we're going to start to turn the page to our defense look at contracts. But there's also some hard news as the Eagles have been losing some assistant coaches. And we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about not the players that we already mentioned who signed reserves/futures contract or future/reserve contract, but some of the players who didn't yet re-sign with the Eagles on that. So this is the time of the year, Adam, a lot to talk about, hard news happening. And of course, next week, the combine is going to start. So we're just turning that page and we're like that mouse in the wheel, right? We just keep going. We're keeping the lights on.
Yeah, no doubt, man. We're doing extra shows this week. Why? Because we want to. No, because we want to give everybody some more information as it happens, or as we get the information, we tell it to you and explain it and explain what it means and what could happen. So, yeah, we knew the Eagles were going to lose some coaches, but we talked about Doug Nussmeier like 6 weeks ago. We said this is going to be the guy. If Kellen Moore gets the head coach job of the Saints, he'll be going. That's happening. There's a coach that who's been valuable. We'll talk that they're losing, who's coached on both sides of the football. We'll talk about that. You mentioned some of the practice squad guys, and as we discuss some of the players that could be leaving or contracts are up, that inside backer position is really thin when we look inside this one. Wow, paper thin.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So in this show, like I said, we'll talk about this coaching situation. We'll get into those reserve future contracts. And then a very interesting fact that we have about inside linebackers that people might not know as it pertains to free agency and the Eagles. So we'll get into all of that. So let's start with the coaching staff. So Kellen Moore, we know he's gone to New Orleans. He's the head coach. And as we've been talking about for weeks, he's very likely, and he is now going to do it, hire Doug Nussmeier as his OC. He looked at some other people, but he's going with Doug Nussmeier. But then he goes and continues to raid the Eagles, as you mentioned, and he brings over a guy who's been an invaluable and versatile, I'll say, assistant position coach for a little bit in TJ Pagnetti. Now, TJ was just for the Eagles, the run game specialist/assistant offensive line. No, I'm sorry. He's getting hired as the run game specialist /
Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. No, you got it right. That was what his title was here with Philly, run game specialist and assistant line coach. Remember, he's coached other positions for them, both sides of the football. In fact, Did he come in with Ryan? I know Ryan came in with Chip Kelly. Did TJ as well?
I believe he did. Yes, I believe they came in close around the same time. And you're right. He did not start off with I think he started off as running backs guy, right? And then went to assistant offensive line coach.
Yeah, and he also coached I think he might have coached in special teams or defense. I know he's had a number of jobs, and obviously, you got to give Kellen Moore credit. TJ Pagnetti, we really haven't talked about him, but he clearly Kellen saw something in him with his versatility. That's an interesting hire. We could confirm that it was, I think, our friend Nick Underhill from the New Orleans.
Football.
Yeah, New Orleans Football. Yeah, it's an interesting name. Yeah, and my friend Mike Triplett, who he and I work together at ESPN. So good luck to those guys. We hope to talk to them in the future, get a little information from them and what they know about the Saints. But as we reported a couple days ago, that Kellen wanted Washburn, the Eagles edge rusher coach, to be his offensive line coach, but he declined to interview. He wanted to stay for, we heard, family reasons and so forth. So, boy, Kellen really wanted to raid this staff. He interviewed Christian Parker, who we had heard that was going to happen. But he chose, or it sounds like it's probably going to be Brandon Staley, who hired Kellen. Remember, Brandon Staley hired Kellen 2 years ago to be his OC with the Chargers. So. That's not official yet, but that was the word around the league. But yeah, Doug Nussmeier. See, this is interesting. We've been working on this for like 3 weeks. I still don't know, though. We think Kevin Patullo. We've been talking about this now for at least 3 weeks. That part of it. Well, if Patullo gets promoted to OC, who's the PGC passing game coordinator? And then who's the quarterbacks coach? I don't know.
Question.
Not sure yet.
Now,
I've looked into it. I get conflicting information. So, folks, I can't tell you because We don't guess. If we know, we tell you. If we told you about Doug Nussmeier 6 weeks ago, it was going to happen if Kellen got the job. We've been telling you for at least 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that Patullo's the hands-on favorite. It's not a lock, but it's got a shot. Now there's some decent names the Eagles are looking at also outside potentially, but again, they're still going to be down 2 coaches one way or the other, or two right. Positions. So we have to see what happens here.
Well, here's a couple of things we know about the Eagles. One, they're going to cast a wide net. They always do. Even if they plan to hand the job to Kevin Patullo, they're still going to have to do some interviews, and they always will. And the second thing we know is it's not just Nick, it's Howie Roseman. Jeffrey gets involved, and from what we understand, Howie's on vacation this week. So I would not expect a decision on this to be made anytime in the next 24 hours. Now, Howie has done work while on vacation before, so I'm not saying that they're waiting for Howie to get back, but usually the wheels get in motion when everybody's sort of together. Last I saw Nick Sirianni, by the way, he was guest bartending in Haddon Heights, South Jersey. That? So, yeah. I mean, these guys are still like kind of living up the Super Bowl. Yes, they have business to conduct and they've been doing it, but like I said, I don't expect anything to be official in the next 24 to 36 hours. I think they're going to do what they normally do.
Yeah, I remember before the Eagles announced Sirianni's staff, I think we put out like whatever scoops we got on the staff we put out. We're like, are they ever going to announce this stuff? It might have been like 3 weeks after we put the information out. I was like, what the hell?
We've gone to the combine before with the Eagles not having a defensive coordinator. In fact, it was a couple of years ago where we ran into some people and the deal with Sean Desai was in the middle of getting consummated. And remember, that's defensive coordinator. So they still hadn't had their entire defensive staff yet coming out of the combine. Matt Patricia didn't come until weeks later, if I'm not mistaken. And then even some of the positional coaches were a little bit after that. So that's what the Eagles do. They take their time and they cast a wide net. They'll talk to some people, and it will be interesting. Now, back to Pagnetti. Now, my read on this, Adam, is that, well, obviously Kellen Moore knows who he is. He's comfortable with him. But like to your point, right, he was just the run game coordinator and assistant offensive line coach. So he has been basically hip pocket of Jeff Stoutland now for a little bit. And then before that, he was the assistant running backs coach, and before that, assistant tight ends coach, and before that, he was quality control. So he spent a lot of time on offense. He spent time at every position, which we know how valuable that is. Go ask John Harbaugh about being a head coach coming from a special teams background, how valuable it is to talk to more people than just one position group. And then secondly, when you're the assistant running backs coach at one point and assistant offensive line coach, again, you're attached to Jeff Stoutland quite a bit. So if I'm going to read between the lines, obviously Kellen Moore knows him and liked him for a reason, but it doesn't hurt to get a Stoutland pupil into your organization if you really believe in the Stoutland teachings, or if you're trying to get Stoutland light acclimated into your program, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. TJ also coached on the defensive side of the football at Oregon for Chip. Chip did bring him and Ryan to Philly. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. As much as Chip was a failure as an NFL head coach, boy, he brought some good coaches here, and Stout was the great one, man. You got to give him credit. Say what you want about Chip. That was another situation for another time, but so they're going to have some roles to fill. In fact, getting to your point about not just announcing, but sometimes they didn't hire them. Remember, Gunter Brewer was hired during the combine that year when he became the Eagles receivers coach. So yeah, that's what happens sometimes.
I wonder if the quarterback's coach job, which is an important job, will come from the college ranks because of how far we are into the NFL season. It's sometimes a little easier to get a college guy at this point than it is to get an NFL guy. The guy that Kellen Moore worked with in Dallas, not Nussmeier. There was another guy he worked with who still with the Eagles. No, I want to say his name was like Herrera, or he's still with the Eagles right now, but he came in with Kellen Moore and with Nussmeier. He was like sort of a right-hand guy. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think he's still with the Eagles as we record this.
All right, is he an offensive assistant?
I thought he was an offensive guy. I want to say he had a Hispanic sounding name. If I'm
I got it.
on
Kyle Valero.
Valero. That's right, Kyle Valero. Now he's
Yeah,
still with
him. I've
you.
heard of. Yes, I know about him from Dallas because I knew some guys on the Dallas staff who mentioned him before. I don't know much about him though. I just know that he has an interesting coaching background, data analytics. So he's been, but he's been in the league a long time. So it's wow, even longer than I thought. Holy smokes!
He's the Eagle right now. He holds the title of Eagles offensive assistant, and usually that kind of title or quality control offense, which right now is Eric Dickerson. Sometimes, as we see those guys get promoted to QB's coach, as we saw with Alex Tanney a couple of years ago. But I don't know if that's going to be a repeat situation here.
Yeah, that to me,
sensitivity of the position.
Yeah, I honestly, it's funny you mentioned Alex Tanney because I was thinking about him. It was probably too early for him, although we were told then that 2 years ago, one of the reasons why the Eagles promoted him quickly is because they were concerned with Steichen taking him. And Steichen got him a year later because the Eagles let him go. It's too bad that he's still not here because you'd like he would have been a perfect guy to groom as a young coach. Because the thing is, they keep losing coaches around Hurts. It's not good. Jalen talked about that in the spring about how many different play callers he's had in his year over his career, going back to his dad in high school. You got another one. It's not anybody's fault. It's just a shame that this keeps happening.
It is.
But
it is a shame.
It is what it is.
But hey, Jalen's a Super Bowl champion now, so he's all right.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't make it any better.
No,
it sucks.
Yeah,
I mean, he's been with Patullo. This will be his 5th year together with him.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens. But they've got some work to do, no doubt. But as you said, they are Super Bowl champs. They've got a good thing going because they still won Victor Fangio. They got him offensively. They've lost some coaches, and Kellen. The other thing is, and I was so hoping that Kellen was going to be back with Jalen for a second year because man, they started getting together late in the season, where you would have loved for them to build on that because it's hard because Jalen had to learn the new system. Kellen had to change some things that he normally does to make it work for the both of them. And it became a beautiful thing late in the season, leaving you wanting more. You want to see them work together more. Now, good for Kellen. He's a head coach. And I know a lot of fans, I think we talked about this last week. How could he take that job? Doesn't he want to win another Super Bowl? We said 5 years, $50 million. What would you rather have? He's got a ring. We turned down the $50 million. And by the way, there was no guarantee he would have been a head coach next year. Of course you take the job. Come on.
Of course, absolutely no guarantee. I mean, Bobby Slowick, I brought him up last. Everybody thought he was the hot pick at the end of the 2 years ago, and then he got fired at the end of this year. You're never guaranteed anything. So
yeah.
And then on the last thing on Patullo, I think he makes the most sense for what you're saying about trying to at least keep a similar system. He was with Kellen Moore for a year. You would imagine he would try to incorporate some of that motion and misdirection that wasn't really part of the offense 2 years ago, and keep that in and keep what's comfortable in, allow Jalen to continue to grow and set protections. But Jalen himself, you could tell he stopped short of saying it because somebody asked Jalen Hurts about it, I think either the day after the Super Bowl or before. And he said something like, well, Kevin's never, and then he stopped. And then he just went on and talked about Patullo. And I think what he was going to say was he's never called plays before. So, but I think Jalen realized he didn't want to go down that road and start making that sound like a criticism or a judgment. So, but it is true. He has not called plays in the NFL before. And so that'll be an adjustment for the Eagles. And that's why I think it would make sense if they could get some kind of veteran, either senior assistant, if they're not going to get a veteran QB's coach. So that would be something to look for.
Yeah, I talked to someone who worked with the Jets when Kevin was there, said he coached quarterbacks, receivers. He's really good. He was just talking about his career. He's worked with receivers and quarterbacks. In fact, they wanted to keep him some years ago, but I'd have to look up his bio. But either he went to the Colts, because I know that's how him and Nick know each other in particular, of all the years that they've known each other. That's when they worked closely together. He became Nick's right-hand man, but at least, again, that he's worked a lot with quarterbacks, that's great. But play calling's an art, man. And the reason to keep him is obvious. You could keep the system, keep it 2 years in a row. I mean, is Kevin Batula really going to be a head coach in 2026? I mean, I don't know, man. We'll have to see what happens. And again, he hasn't even gotten this job yet. So, although he's the favorite, It's not a lock. So we'll see what happens.
All right, let's move on to the players who did not re-sign from the practice squad to a reserve futures contract. There were several of them, including quarterback Ian Book, fullback Kerry Blasingame, wide receiver Kyle Phillips, edge rusher Charles Harris, and inside linebacker Nick Morrow. Now, the interesting thing here is that most of these guys, not all, but a good deal of them are sort of the guys who've been around the league for a little bit, like Blasingame and Charles Harris and Morrow, and they've already seen a lot from Book. You know, Kyle Phillips was the one I thought that they would want to bring back. I think he's a little bit younger, if I'm not mistaken, but
yes,
and they still can, by the way.
Yep. Yeah, there's no rule. What's that?
I just wanted to get your overall assessment on it.
Yeah. By the way, with Phillips, so we've seen this before. There a couple times over the years we've done these shows where we talk about these decisions. They've actually re-signed a couple receivers they did not offer initial contract to be on their 90-man roster, and then some weeks later they did re-sign them. So yeah, it's not a done deal that they won't be back. But Blasingame, would not surprise us at all because Kellen Moore likes the fullback that he brings him to New Orleans. And then you've got Charles Harris, who's, he's at around 30 years old, so he doesn't seem to have much left. Nick Morrow, they know.
He was the emergency guy, and he wasn't even really you. He was the emergency guy when both Graham and Huff were hurt, not able to play. And I think he only played like 3 snaps in one game. So you could tell that there was not a future there for him.
Yep. And Kyle Phillips is a slot receiver who the Titans liked. And there was a draft pick that they had this season that beat him out for the last roster spot. He was on the Eagles practice squad, on and off, but it just didn't register with him. But again, they really don't need another slot receiver. It's too bad. He's a guy that I know the Titans at one point were very high on, but they changed coaching staffs and he had an injury history, so it just didn't work.
To your point, I think it was Joseph Ngata last year who, after the season, didn't immediately sign a reserve futures deal, but then did a couple of weeks later. So it wouldn't surprise me if a guy like Kyle Phillips got, eventually back. But the other guys, I think that those were just guys for this year only and for break glass for in case of emergency if you needed him. And Nick Morrow did have to play on special teams, and Kerry Blasingame did too as well. But you can find a fullback at any time. Plus, Van Suren's going to come back, and they may still want.
That's right. Yeah. We'll talk about him in a minute. But Nick Morrow, by the way, the fact that you could see him mic'd up, he was active during the Super Bowl. He was talking to Baun on the sideline, and Baun's like, "I'm going to get one," and he did. That interception, my God. I'm just kind of awe of this Zack Baun situation. This is our 8th year. I've never seen a story like this guy. Like, this is so out of the blue. To become arguably the NFL's best for one season off the ball linebacker is just you can't make this up. It's just great coaching, but even better stories. The player seems like the nicest guy in the world. I love hearing him talk. Great energy and passion for the game. He seems so appreciative and grateful what's happened here, and he must, not that Vic Fangio needs the money. He should at least give him 5% of his big deal he's going to sign.
No, I can't compare it to anything other than say that Zack Baun for an entire year was basically what Travis Fulgham was for 4 weeks. Baun figured out how to make it happen for an entire year.
It's just ridiculous.
I kept waiting. I'm like, this can't be real, right? This is going to disappear at some point, like Fulgham. But nope, he just kept playing at a high level.
Again, folks, in training camp, we saw nothing like this. We talked about it. That he wasn't mentally. He was really good. He wasn't making the same mistake twice. But that was the best thing you could say about him because you didn't see this stuff. Like you see it in Week 1 against Green Bay. You're like, wow, this is crazy with all these tackles and big plays. Well, we'll see if it lasts, and it lasted.
Yeah, the one thing that is impossible to have seen in training camp, and I don't even know if he was doing it at that point yet, but, you go back to that Jacksonville game, I want to say that was week 7, right? Because Cleveland was week 4, then the bye was week 5, then they came out of the bye and played. Cleveland was week out of the bye. So 6. Yeah, I think Jacksonville was week 7. First play of the game, we went through this on the All 22 show with Greg Cosell, where they try to get it to the tight end Ingram on the right side in between that zone, and somehow Baun reads it in a way that guys you've had to have played that position to just know that because it wasn't really where Baun should be. They were trying to exploit a hole in the zone, and Baun figured out a way to widen his depth to make sure it wasn't exploited and broke up the pass.
I remember that. Yep.
It's the first play of the game, and Trevor Lawrence must be like, holy hell, if he's doing that, I don't know how we're going to throw the ball. And they had trouble throwing the ball.
And he's got great length for that. What's that?
The instincts were just
unbelievable. That you just hit on. And the thing is, he also has great length for that position. For an inside backer in a 34 front with you could call it a 5-2, call it whatever you want. It's an odd man front. I mean, old school people call it 34, but he plays in this odd man front. And to be the best player at his position, it's just you can't make it up. And we're going to talk about the contract, what it's going to look like, folks. It's anything. There's some stuff that's out there is way off. I mean, we'll explain why. I don't know where some of these people come up with these numbers, like $10 million. Like, what are you looking at? Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, we've been asked a couple of times on different interviews about these spot rack, projections for free agents, and they do not look accurate to me. I don't even want to answer them anymore because they're just I don't know who comes up with them. You always stay with scouting, evaluate the evaluator, who's doing the scouting, who's doing the grading for PFF, or who's doing we don't know. I don't know who's doing that, but I don't
know who put it out there. To be honest with you, we were asked on Twitter if these are correct. I don't answer questions there. I answer them here, and we'll in a couple minutes we'll give it to you. It'll be interesting because the Eagles are super light at inside backer. It's one of these situations where going into the season, you were just hoping they'd want one guy back.
Yeah.
You would hope, but now it's just one of these situations. Burks played well. Baun played out of his mind. Dean was great before the injury, and Trot Jr. we know they love. We've talked about this for a couple months. So it's actually an interesting situation, which again, who the hell knew coming into the season?
No doubt about it. All right, that's a good transition to talk about these inside linebackers and their contracts. We're going to do that in a second. First, you need to hear from our friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, everybody, make sure you get to Sky Motor Cars so you can get the best customer service in the car industry, the best inventory, just the best everything. Whether you're buying or whether you're trading in, you have to consult first Sky Motor Cars because you won't want to leave. You'll love Brett Schiller and his staff. They're incredible people. So make sure you get into Sky Motor Cars in Westchester, PA, or you get to their website, which is skymotorcars.com. I have a really interesting fact, Adam, about inside linebackers that I don't know that a lot of people know, and we will drop this on them when it's pertinent. Let's first just go under which guys are under contract at the inside linebacker position.
Yep. So Trot Jr. will enter year 2 of his 4-year rookie deal. Nakobe Dean, unfortunately, with the patella tendon injury, the question is, when will he be back? He's going to be, barring something unforeseen, he'll be able to play next season, but very realistically, he'll start the season on a reserve PUP, miss 4 weeks. Don't have any idea because it's generally a 9-month recovery from patella tendon. That's if there are no complications. It's 7 to 9 months in that area, usually closer to 9. It's the timelines, as we were told, is longer than ACL, but it's not the death knell that it used to be, man. You heard torn patella tendon that back in the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, it ended careers. Not anymore. The guys could come back, but it's a shame. He was having a breakout season. We forget he really was terrific, and then Dallas Gann signed a reserve/future deal, so that becomes valid March 12th at 4 p.m. Eastern. He's on the roster. That's it. There will be the only 3 players right now, unless they re-sign someone before that. The free agents are Baun, Burks, and Ben Van Sumeren, by the way, is an exclusive rights free agent. That's if you have 2 years or less. The Eagles, they have to make a decision whether they're going to tender him or not. He suffered a major knee injury and had surgery. So he was another guy who was a great storied inside backer before he got hurt, the fullback, very athletic, good special teams player. We had that great game against the Giants 2 years ago, a guy that they really like. They were developing, and it's too bad. So we'll see if they tender him. But the big one is obviously Zack Baun.
Yeah, I mean, the whole exclusive rights thing, that's because he's an undrafted free agent, right, with 2 years?
Yep, 2 years or less. Yep.
Okay. I would have to think as long as his recovery is going on schedule because of A, how thin they are, as you just mentioned, at the position, and B, how much time they invested in him, and then the versatility they were using him with a fullback, and Greg Cosell telling us that someone told him he had the best hands of anybody on the team. I would have to think that they get first right of refusal with this tender. So it's almost impossible to lose him unless they just don't want him back. But I have a feeling.
Yeah, no one. Yeah, there is no. He's not restricted. They have exclusive negotiating rights. So
no one else can negotiate with.
Right. They either tender him or they don't. If they don't tender him, he becomes an immediate free agent. If they tender him, he's theirs. And whatever they want to pay him. Man, it's just a shame, man. God damn. He was such a great story. Let's hope let's hope he'll be okay by OTAs. We'll learn more about that injury going forward. But I also, by the way, with Burks, boy, did he come on late in the season. He looked damn good. I thought for sure, in our pregame show with Greg Cosell, I was concerned that somehow they get him. They didn't get anybody, Andy Reid and Matt Nagy, with their game plan. They got man. They didn't get Burks.
Yeah, that's a great point. And he's a guy who I see a lot of value in as a backup who may have to start depending on how the line, at least early on, depending on how Nakobe Dean's progress is going. And you know what? I really like that the Eagles, it may not have worked out great 2 years ago with Zach Cunningham, but I do like their more willingness lately to have guys with some size to them, with some height and length to them. And I don't know when that philosophy changed. You can't say Vic Fangio because Zach Cunningham was before Vic Fangio, even though Fangio had some influence and on the front office from being with the team in 2 years ago. But I like that. I like height and length. And I'm not trying to get all Chip Kelly on the defense, but I think that's important. Yeah. Especially when you play zone as much as they do now, and you have guys who can close passing lanes because they're long-lived, right? I mean, that's important. So I like that they've done that.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
Zack Baun, he's got ideal length. It's just under 6'3". You love that. If you need him to rush the passer, he could do that because that's the way he was drafted out of Wisconsin. It didn't work. He played some strong side linebacker for the Saints, but he's more of an edge rusher, special teamer, and that's really what the Eagles signed him to do and cross-train him and inside backer. And Vic said, no, we're going to keep him here inside, and it's a home run. But, man, because he tore it up and was incredible, the contract's going to be richer than you think, folks. I'm just telling you. That's the word around the league early is we'll get into that in about 30 seconds to a minute, but it's going to be way bigger than you think. For those people thinking it'll be 10 or 11 million, you know something we don't know because it doesn't sound like it.
All right, here's the fact that I'm going to drop on our audience because they may not realize this. And this is a little bit of a flaw in the system that I assume will be rectified at some time in the future. But for now, it remains the case. The franchise tag number for an inside linebacker is, well, really, the franchise designation is just linebacker. It doesn't differentiate between inside or outside. So we all know that outside linebackers, especially in a 3-4, are really edge rushers primarily and get paid a lot more. So the inside linebackers have the edge rusher, outside linebacker to thank for the fact that the franchise tag is a way higher number than if you were to just take the top 5 highest paid inside linebackers and excluded the outside linebackers. So that means if the Eagles wanted to, which they will not because they don't use the franchise tag anyway, but if they wanted to franchise Baun, they're basically paying him top 5 outside linebacker pass rusher money, and that ain't going to happen because that number is about probably north of 20, way north of 20 million. So that's a fact that I don't know a lot of people realize, that linebacker is just linebacker, not inside, not outside when it comes to the franchise tag. which I imagine, Adam, will someday be rectified. It's not going to be the NFLPA that does it. They're happy about that. But I think the NFL will probably have to figure that out someday.
Yeah, it is ridiculous that and then Chris Jones tried to he's played one of the big reasons when we do the next show when we talk about D tackles why his average per season is so high, and by far, by the way, is because he's played defensive end, and he could have gotten ugly if they didn't pay him because of his edge rush ability when he's done it. But yeah, it is true. It's ridiculous that they lump them in together. If you're a 34 outside linebacker, you're getting paid the same as an inside backer. It's absurd.
Yeah. So I mean, this goes back to Jimmy Graham trying to be a slot receiver when he was a tight end to make a receiver.
I love that.
There's no slot receiver distinction either. There's just wide receiver. So he was trying to get paid like a top 5 outside wide receiver as a tight end.
Our friend Bill Polian, I remember Bill talking about it because the league, I think, had him be a witness. It was just ridiculous. It was like Bill talked about it. He goes, he's a tight end. He was not a receiver. Like he was pretty steadfast. But now last year, by the way, linebackers, the tag was 24 million. Just so you know, the salary cap typically goes up 8 to 10 million. So, oh boy.
Yeah. All right, so then let's try to figure out some comps here. I know you have a couple as we try to figure out what the Eagles have to deal with and what the rest of the NFL will have to deal with Zack Baun. What are some comps here?
All right, so going back to the Senior Bowl, I talked to one league source who goes, you could start at Patrick Queen. I'm like, okay. And I said, why? He goes, because he's better than Aziz Al-Shire, got $13.3 million. I know that Al-Shire's been a nice player. He's never played even remotely well as Zack Baun did. JOK, the linebacker,
good player,
makes $12.5 million a year. But the guy that I spoke with said you got to start at Queen's deal, $13.67 million per season. He thinks he goes. I'm telling you, that'll be the floor. I brought up Matt Milano's contract. Now Matt Milano, and I give his agent credit for getting $14.165 million on a 2-year deal with his injury history.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And remember, Baun does have edge rush ability because that's the way he played before the season. So it's a very extremely small factor. The Eagles use him a little bit as an edge rusher, but he doesn't have an injury history. But he's only had the one good year. In fact, it was an elite year. So this guy goes, listen, he goes, I'm telling you, if you want to check back with me, he goes, the guy. Let's say it's a very strong league source who would have some interest in it, and he goes, it'll be. He has no relationship to the Eagles. He just knows this market. He goes, it's going to be there. And he goes, I see it being somewhere around 15 million in the end. He goes, he doesn't know the agent, but he goes, if you fight for your player on the open market because he's an unrestricted free agent, that's the number, is somewhere around 15 million. Because the problem is after Milano, because remember, Matt Milano's a 43 outside backer, but he's an off-the-ball linebacker. These are all off-the-ball linebackers, whether Patrick Queen, an inside backer, and a 34, Tremaine Edmonds, $18 million a year. Fred Warner, $19.045 million. And Roquan Smith, the highest paid off-the-ball linebacker, $20 million. He's not getting that. Could he get Tremaine Edmonds money? I doubt it. But the thing that I've learned is, in this business, it was with Christian Kirk, right? When he signed that obscene deal. I give the agent credit. Eagles were actually in on that at one point. I don't know how serious it was, but maybe they might have been just checking in. But anyway, you've got leverage as an agent, man. When you got 6 teams in it, it could get so rich. You go, I don't believe this. This is crazy. Because the outrage in the contract negotiator community when the numbers got released for Christian Kirk's deal as a slot receiver, it's because there were so many teams involved. So I'm just letting you know, folks, that thing can get richer than you think, or we thought, or anyone. Unless Zach says, you know what, he tells his agent, I want to stay, get it done, make it happen, get Philly to give me don't insult me, get something that's respectable. You never know. He could do that, and I know he wants to stay, and they want him back badly. But you got to be careful once you get to free agency. Once you get to March 10th, by the way, which is the open negotiating period, you never know.
It could work for you. It could work against you if you don't get what you thought, and then the team knows it. the team that employed you, and all of a sudden that number is like, oh, all right, now you're going to have to play.
You don't have a deal. You thought you were getting it. Aha. Exactly.
Right. That's the fun part. Listen, the Eagles always operate in good faith. Baun and his agents. It'll be interesting to see what happens and how it happens. But that is the situation. That's the money that we're looking at here for Zack Baun potentially, and whether or not the Eagles want to match it, want to pay it, we'll find out. So other than that, that'll do it for this one. Next episode, we're going to get into defensive linemen, including edges and defense tackles, and we'll also talk about the secondary as well. That'll be loaded full of contract information. That's going to do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in the Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the Birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.